Okay, I think that we're live. For anybody who knows me, this is a little bit like my nightmare. But oh, hello. So okay, everything's working, and I haven't crashed anything or burnt anything to the ground, which is great. Hi everyone. My name is Onjali Rauf. Hello, Sarah. And I am the author of two books, The Boy at the Back of the Class and The Star Outside My Window. Hello, Sandra. It's going to get very distracting. Thank you so much for joining me here today. It's a great honour to be here with the At Home with the Four Indies, Lingham's Forum Books, Bookba and Bookish, and I'm going to give myself and a star for remembering those amazing names and those amazing bookshops. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will be discussing my two books and just what it feels like to be called an author, and what's led me here, and why I'm writing what I'm writing, and the inspirations behind it. And it's an amazing time to be able to do this actually when independent bookshops are starting to open and the indie book week is just literally a few days away. So thank you so much for having me. Now, this is very strange because I'm literally talking to myself, so I'm going to be very grateful to anybody who's popping up with questions, and I'll take them as I go. But I have a list of wonderful questions here gifted to me by the At Home with crew, so I'll start answering some of those now. Okay, so the first one is, when did you know that you wanted to be a writer? For everyone out there who is a writer at heart, you'll know that no matter what you're doing in your life, you will always go back to writing stories, whether it's at night time, whether it's at lunch breaks, whether it's at break times at school or at work, but I've always been writing stories or creating stories in my head, and I didn't really think of myself becoming a writer until I was probably in my 20s. No, actually before that, at university I had actually written a short and ridiculous story that I gave in to my professor, so I did want to be a writer. I've always known that it's something I want to do, but I didn't really think of it as something I could be until a little bit later on in my life. But yeah, I've just always been intrigued by writers and authors that I've loved, and it's always been something that I've just wanted to do. I've always wanted to create stories, and I think for any writer out there, you'll know what that's like. Second question is, as a child, what books were you interested in? So I have lots and lots of books that I was interested in as a child, and I think for the readers amongst you, you'll know that you won't stick to a particular genre. Perhaps you'll explore and want to read as many worlds as you can. So I've got some key books by key authors that influenced my childhood. The first has to be Roald Dahl. Now, Roald Dahl's books were introduced to me at school by my primary school teacher, Mrs. Helen Coomey, at Mayflower Primary School, and we had reading time every single day before home time for about 20 minutes to half an hour, and Mrs. Coomey would literally make reading time the best time of any day of any week. Like, it was just the most, we looked forward to that time in ways that it would probably impede our lessons actually, but we loved story time with Mrs. Coomey, and she would opened up the world of Roald Dahl for me from a very young age. I remember her reading the wonderful story of Henry Sugar and being absolutely fascinated by this character. And Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, the Twits. Mrs. Coomey read the whole lot of them to us, and I remember being just absolutely blown away by Roald Dahl and wishing that I could come up with stories that were as brilliant as his. And there's a slight homage to Roald Dahl in The Boy at the Back of the Class via the Green Caravan. The other one was, of course, Tintin. So me and my brother, we loved reading the Tintin comic books together. We loved the television cartoon series that was out in the 1980s that we grew up with. And Tintin was, I think, one of the first kind of written word formats that me and my brother enjoyed, because my brother wasn't really a massive reader. He didn't really like chapter books, but he loved comic books, and he loved, reading the newspaper cartoon strips and stuff. So it was the first thing that we really shared and that we loved equally together. So yeah, Tintin was a very big deal for me, and that's why it's in the boy at the back of the class as well. Now, this is probably a strange one, but Agatha Christie's Poirot series was massive for me as a child. Now, the reason for this is because my mum loved Agatha Christie, and we had these books lying around literally everywhere, in every nook and crook and corner of the house, and on our bookshelves. And the reason why my mum loved it so much, loved Agatha Christie's stories so much, was because they are relatively easy to read, and she was learning English through them as well. So I picked them up from a very young age. I think I don't know, I remember reading them in primary school, and probably worrying my teachers a little bit about, talking about murder mysteries and how to solve them and all the rest of it. But Agatha Christie was a huge influence in my childhood, and I think it's down to her and the Poirot series that I have always loved any books that have included, murders and solving crimes and trying to find an answer to a question. And the final one I'm going to mention is, of course, a gigantor of the literary world, Tolkien. I think I read The Hobbit I remember reading The Hobbit when I was around about 7 or 8, and then I fell into the Lord of the Rings trilogy head first, and it's a love that has stayed with me, and anything to do with adventure and exploring new worlds has always captivated me, and I think Tolkien is just a genius at doing that in so many ways. That was a very long answer to the question. Right, the next one is, how did you first come to visit refugees in Calais? So for those of you who might have read The Boy at the Back of the Class, or who know a little bit about it, will know that it features a refugee boy at the centre of the story, and that the whole novel is based around 4 pretty spectacular kids trying to find out more about this refugee boy called Ahmet. Now, this book was written in 2017, a couple of years after I'd already started volunteering for the refugee camps in Calais and Dunkirk, and I have to say, I never went out to the camps thinking I would write a story about it. At that time I was writing completely different kinds of stories, and nothing that was to do with real life. But in 2017 I felt a little bit ill and I couldn't go out to the camps, and my team and my friends were all there, and I felt absolutely wretched. I just thought, oh God, I really want to be out there and I want to be helping, but I can't. And suddenly this image of this little boy that I'd seen in the camps in 2016 called Rayhan, who the book is dedicated to, he popped into my head whilst I was trying to recover from this illness, and for some reason he wouldn't leave me. His image was just stuck on my brain, and I started to think about him and what would happen to him if he ever did make it, to somewhere safe, whether it was the UK or somewhere else, as an 8 or 9-year-old, and walked into a classroom and was surrounded by faces that he didn't know or understand, and faces who in turn couldn't really understand him, and that's where The Boy at the Back of the Class kind of came to be born. It was from my sickbed, really, and the title The Boy at the Back of the Class just jumped into my head and wouldn't leave me, and I started to write the book based on that. But that first those visits to the refugee camps were all inspired by this news stories I was reading, and in particular Alan Kurdi's story. For those of you who don't know, Alan Kurdi is a 3-year-old boy, a Syrian boy who unfortunately died trying to get to safety, and his picture was just in every single format of media you could possibly imagine in 2015, and he was my wake-up call. So he was the reason why I wanted to go out and try and help as much as I could, and he led me out to the refugee camps in the quest to answer my own questions. And I probably answered about 4 questions in that one question, which I tend to do, so sorry about that. The next one is, you are the founder of an NGO called Making History. Can you tell us a little bit about how and why you set up this organisation? Absolutely, my absolute pleasure too. So Making History was set up in 2011 unofficially as a book club. The reasons for my setting it up are quite sad, and I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but it involves a woman that I loved very much trying to escape from someone who was trying to hurt her, and was unable to do so. So I set up a book club in her name, in the hopes of raising a little bit of money and donating it to women's shelters in her name, because I'd met her, first come to know of her through a women's shelter where she had run away to try and be safe. And the book club kind of grew a little bit, and we started getting people asking to do more things. So and the women's shelters that we were working with asked for us to help them a little bit more as well. So we started to have various parties, like an Alice in Wonderland tea party and a Harry Potter dinner party to raise more money. And then we started sending more and more things to the shelters that we were working with, and pretty much we've started to work from that. We started to work with different women's shelters and different organisations, and people were coming to us with their stories, or trying to get help, trying to find where to go for help. And so Making Herstory grew from essentially a book club into what we are now, which is working with as many shelters as we can, and trying to highlight awareness around domestic abuse and domestic violence, and how it's unacceptable on all levels, and what we can do to try and help people who are trying to survive those things. So Making Herstory was born in 2011. I can't believe it's been 9 years, gosh. Right, the next question, I'm just keeping an eye out for any questions you might be asking. Your books shine a light on the plight of those displaced by war, family circumstances, and in society. Why did you decide to write for children rather than adults? The simple answer to that is really because it's so much fun. I think with writing for children, you can take elements of reality and add things to it that you can't when you're writing for adults. Whether it's the importance of lemon sherbets, which some adults might not get, or Tintin, or a pomegranate. All of those kind of things that might seem very basic to an adult world can seem quite magical to children. So you can make them magical in so many ways. So I've always wanted to write for children. I just think it's so much more fun, and you get to really push the boundaries of the imagination a little bit more, I think. So yeah, that's why I decided to write for children. Hello, Sandra. Right. So questions about my books now. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about The Boy at the Back of the Class and how you came to write the book? Where did the idea come from? I'm so sorry. I think I've already answered that question. So The Boy at the Back of the Class, as I said, came about in 2017, a couple of years after I started working in the camps. And it's dedicated to a particular boy, a baby boy called Rayhan. Now, I always show Rayhan's picture whenever I can, just in the hopes of one day that I'll get to see him again. So this is baby Rayhan, and this was the moment that I met him. It was my first and last moment with him, because unfortunately a lot of refugees that we help, whether they're children and toddlers or whether they're grandparents, we rarely get to see them again because of what's going on in the camps. And this picture was taken by a very good friend of mine, Yasmin, who very kindly managed to capture that moment. And he was the boy, he was the baby that stuck with me, and whose vision came into my head when I was writing The Boy at the Back of the Class. So for me, Ahmet, who's a refugee boy in this book, is very much baby Rayhan, and my imagining of, my ideal imagining of what might happen if he were to ever make it to somewhere safe, but completely alone and without his mother. The cast of characters in the book are very true to life. Did you find it easy to create each one and make them distinctive? That's such an interesting question. The characters are very true to life, because I have to say that a lot of the characters in the book are based on characters in my real life. So for example, Mrs. Khan is loosely based on a friend who is called Mrs. Khan, and she happens to be an amazing teacher, and I think does smell of jam a lot, lovely jam, and has curly hair. And Mr. Greggs, who's a not so nice character, he's based on an old neighbour that used to live down the road and was just perfectly miserable to everyone. So I absolutely do take elements of characters for the books from real life characters, and I think it's really fun to do, and it's not hard, because you get to expand on them and make them extra lovely or extra mean, or just add things to them that they might not be in real life. But yeah, I don't know, I don't find it too hard, I suppose, because I'm taking the elements of the real and putting them into fiction, so it's not hard to make them distinctive. And I think everyone is distinctive. We're all a bit like fingerprints and snowflakes. We all have our quirks and eccentricities and loves and hates. It's really easy to put all of those into books sometimes. Okay, the next question is, the themes in the book are very serious and scary. Did you ever worry about upsetting children? Now I have to say that in writing The Boy at the Back of the Class and The Star Outside My Window, my editor Lena Macaulay and I did have several discussions around parts of the books that might be too upsetting, or things that I wanted to put in the back that might be too upsetting. So yes, we did worry. We do worry about those things. We don't want the books to be so, upsetting and depressing that nobody feels as if there's any hope left, and sometimes it can feel like that as an aid worker. But we were very careful to make sure that we balanced anything that might be upsetting with the uplifting, and making sure that we didn't shy away from reality, but presented it in a way that was easier to understand in many ways. But I think that actually most children's books do contain things that are upsetting, and I don't think there's anything new about me doing it. I think it's always been there in children's books, whether that's Matilda, who lives in a very abusive household with the most awful teacher in the world, Mrs. Trunchbull, who's ridiculously abusive, to Harry Potter, who's escaping and running for his life. It's, death and the balance of death and life is there, and I think in most children's books we do deal with quite difficult subjects, but we're just doing it in a realm that might not seem real all the time. But yeah, we do worry, and we try not to upset anyone, although I do know that the books do make people cry sometimes, and that's okay. It's good to cry over things. The storytelling is both heartwarming and heartbreaking. This is the next question. This is really lovely, these questions. It shows the best and the worst of humanity. Do you feel that storytelling is one of the best ways to highlight what is happening in the world? Absolutely. I think whatever form of story you're seeing, what we see on the news, that's a story that's coming from an angle. It's being presented to us in a certain way. What we see in the newspapers, again, the same. What we see in books, in our history books, in our fictional books, everything is a story. The people around us, our family, our friends, they're all stories. They're all walking stories. So, storytelling is just one way of us presenting a story and accepting it in a certain way. I don't think it's very different to any other form of storytelling that we're hearing. And I think in this age where we're on Facebook and we're on Twitter, and there's all these formats for stories to come through to us, we just have to be very aware of what's real and what isn't. And I think when it comes to stories for children, when it comes to writing stories for children, and even as a child, this is one of the best ways and the most free ways that we can explore the bigger issues that are taking place in the world that we might not understand, and that might be painful to grasp. And it's also a way of perhaps also hopefully preventing future stories that might be painful. That's the hope anyway. Okay, the next question is, right, after the success of The Boy at the Back of the Class, for which I thank everyone, thank you so much, was it difficult to write The Star Outside My Window? Very, very simple answer to that question is yes. The Star Outside My Window was so difficult to write that it wasn't even really done until literally a few months before publication, and I think that might be just the way I work now, but I don't think it was down to just the success. I did get a bit worried that people wouldn't want to read it, but I think it's also to do with the fact that it deals with quite a difficult subject matter quite openly. We're not trying to mask the fact that it's dealing with hurts happening within the home, but also I wasn't expecting to have to write another book in such a short time, and I think that's what really stalled me. I think once you get into the kind of publishing realm, and especially as a new author, it takes you by surprise that you're expected to write books so quickly, and I think that's what really stopped me in some ways. But thankfully I have an amazing team at Hachette, and I have an amazing editor, Lena Macaulay, who helped to kind of give me the space I needed to step back and write it, and also to help me through all the difficult bits that I didn't really know how to tackle, and were just really honest with me as well. So The Star Outside My Window, this version is probably the third version of the actual story, because I was having such a difficult time that the story didn't come. It didn't come for ages, and I think we even got stuck on the title. The title took forever to decide on. So and I'm very linear as an author. I can't write until I have the title in place, until I've got the first chapter in place, and then I start to write. And then I realise that the characters are wrong, so I have to go back and restart. But yeah, it was very, very difficult. I'm hoping anyway that nothing will be that hard again. Fingers crossed. Okay. Can you tell us where the ideas and inspiration for this book came from? Okay, so The Star Outside My Window, I have to say, it's again much like The Boy at the Back of Class. It wasn't something I was expecting to write. Before I started writing this, I did actually pitch another idea, which was about a fox and a young boy. But then I heard that this amazing story called Pax was coming out, so I couldn't write that one. But when I started talking to my editor, I realised that I have lots of stories to tell through the children that I work with, through Making Her Story, and the women that I meet, and also what's happened in my own family, which has led to the creation of Making Her Story. So we started to talk about some of the stories that I encounter by children who have been through so much and who are trying to deal with what's happened within their home. And yeah, it's a kind of amalgamation of different stories from different worlds that I get to visit and get to help as part of Making Her Story. So the inspiration is literally the children that I've met in women's shelters, and yeah, the amazing people that try and help them, especially, so there's an amazing woman called Mrs. Owuchukwu in this, who's the foster mother, and she is absolutely sublime. And I think, you know, having gotten to know foster mothers who really try and help the most traumatized children by welcoming them into their homes and trying to give them a new home and a fresh start, those kinds of characters have led to the creation of this book, and I really hope that it does them a little bit of justice. Okay. Okay, so the next one is quite lovely. We love the drawings of all the different constellations. How did you decide to include these, and how did the idea come to you? So for anyone out there who is a budding astronomer, I'm with you there. I used to love anything to do with the stars, anything to do with constellations, light years, all of that, but my brain was very, I don't know, it felt like there was a block. I couldn't really grasp it all, but I loved listening and I loved watching programs. I still do to this day, anything to do with the stars. And one of my favourite places to go to since I first visited it when I was a kid is of course the Royal Observatory. And I remember when I was trying to think of what to do with this book and being horribly stuck with it, I went down to the Royal Observatory, and of course, you know, wherever you go, especially in their gift shops, they always have these amazing kinds of diagrams of the constellations. And I just thought, you know what, it'd be so cool to include them, because most of the stories of the constellations are so intriguing, and they completely matched what Anaya, the heroine of The Star Outside My Window, is going through in so many ways. So I started doing a lot of research around the stories, the myths and the legends behind the constellations. And when we finished writing The Star Outside My Window, I just asked my editor, could we include some of the drawings, some of the kind of just very simple linear drawings of the constellations and the chapter headings. And luckily Pippa Kernick, who's the illustrator, had the time to do them. So each of the constellations match in some way, the myth of that constellation matches in some way to what's happening in the story. So, you know, hopefully you can go and discover what that's about. But yeah, it was a wish that kind of came true. Okay. Oh, can you tell us a little bit about Pippa Kernick, who has provided the amazing illustrations for both books? Now, Pippa Kernick is a genius. I think she's a genius. And I am so lucky that my editor, Lena, selected Pippa, or I don't know how the process works actually. I was just introduced to Pippa over email one day, and not even introduced to her, I was introduced to her works, and Lena, my editor, said, we would love for her to illustrate your book, and if you want to give us any kind of ideas to what you would like. And I really didn't have much, there wasn't much of a brief for the covers or what I wanted, but Pippa just got them spot on. So I remember her sending this through to Lena, and Lena sending it on to me and being absolutely blown away, because I absolutely had no idea what the cover would look like for The Boy at the Back of the Class. I didn't really have an idea in my head, but what she came up with was just exactly what I wanted. And the same with Star Outside My Window. I think she has a knack for picking up on the most significant kind of moments for me as an author, and being able to just put it into a cover. So for The Boy at the Back of the Class, the illustrations inside, those were a little bit more informed, because when I handed in the first draft for The Boy at the Back of the Class, it included quite a lot of drawings, and we managed to kind of come to a agreement on what could be included and what couldn't be included, and what we had to have time for to get illustrated. So Pippa took those awful drawings of mine and inserted her beautiful and magical touch to them. Pippa is just an amazing illustrator. She has a flurry of amazing books that she has illustrated and written as well. And yeah, she's just an amazing person. I've only met her twice, I think, in these last 2.5 years. Once was at my publisher's for an event, and the second time was for a prize ceremony. And yeah, so I've kind of got to see snippets of her, and yeah, just marvel at her work in person in those brief moments. But she is pretty staggering. I think most illustrators are, actually. At the back of each book, you have put further information about the issues raised. Why did you think this was important to do? Now, I knew from the beginning that when we were writing, or when the publication for these had been agreed, that we would have to include something to ensure that children and parents reading the books could have more than just a story to go away with. I wanted children to take the story and run with it in a way that would be informative for them, and which would lead them to maybe ask more questions that they could find out their own answers to. So with The Boy at the Back of the Class, oh, and the other thing is end pages. So you never know as an author how many spare pages you'll have at the end of a book. And I got told that we had a little bit extra than we thought. So I was always going to do something, but I thought maybe 1 or 2 pages at the most. But when we got told that there were a few extra pages, I thought, okay, I'm just going to put as much as I can in there. So I knew that with this book I wanted children to continue asking questions. So the narrator in this book is not afraid to ask questions. In fact, I think most of the book centres around they're trying to understand and get their questions answered. So I wanted the questions to continue. I don't want the questions to stop after you've finished reading either of the books. And yeah, so the end matter, we just decided that we would try and put in as much as we could that would lead to more questions, and also that would perhaps help children and parents and teachers and anybody else using the book to have something to move forward with that could lead to perhaps more action on behalf of refugees and refugee volunteers and anybody who tries to help them. So they were definitely done on purpose, and they were definitely they're definitely there for a purpose. And I hope that the conversations that those pages, those crucial questions will help continue, will lead to something more than the book itself. And for The Star Outside My Window, as hard as it was to do, I did want to include information and helplines, and ensure that any child or any adult who was reading this book and who might have been affected by the same issues had somewhere to go, and knew that there were people out there who could help them. And I also wanted to ensure that the definitions around some of the issues that were being brought up were explained in a friendly way. And yeah, and again, that the questions didn't end with the book, that people could continue their discussions and perhaps have their own conversations around what had happened to Anaya and to Noah and to their new foster brothers and sister. So yeah, so definitely important for us to do, and very, very significant for us to be able to do as well. So I'm really grateful that we got to do that. Okay, so the next question is, do you see your characters as role models for other children? That's so interesting. You know, I would love for them to be role models, and I think they are in many ways. I think the narrator, the boy at the back of the class, is a role model in the sense that they are fearless in their questioning. They are not afraid to have their questions verbalized. They're not afraid to go and find out the answers to their questions. And of course, they do go on a massive adventure to try and help Ahmed, the refugee boy. But that's not the kind of fearless I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the ability to face the questions that you have about something that might not always be safe to ask, or might not feel safe to ask. So definitely, I would love the narrator in the book, The Back Class, to be a role model. And the same with Anaya. I think Anaya is, again, she's fearless in a different kind of way, because her questions aren't as final and as formed as the narrator at the book, The Back Class, but she's still not afraid to go on her quest. She's still not afraid to try and do what it takes to help what she says is her mum's star. So she is fearless as well. But yeah, if they were role models in any way, that would be immense. And wow, that would be amazing. Fingers crossed. Right. Now, because I basically talk so fast, I'm reaching the last section of my questions. So these questions are about writing. Oh, and before I hit on that, I've missed one. So the final question about my books. Final question is, are you able to tell us what you are working on next? Short answer to that is yes. So I'm working on a book called The Night Bus Hero. It's a bit late, but shh, don't tell anyone. So The Night Bus Hero is a book about a night bus. This is my prop. It's a biscuit tin, but biscuit tins come in very handy sometimes. So The Night Bus Hero is a story about it's told from the perspective of a boy called Hector, and Hector is a bit of a bully and not very nice character, but one day he decides to go and pick on a man called Thomas, and Thomas happens to be a homeless man who lives in the local park. Now, their relationship forges the centre of The Night Bus Hero, but at the same time as their relationship develops, there's something happening across London, and it's not very good for the homeless community. So there are a number of robberies that take place across London, and the homeless community are kind of dragged into what's going on there, and it's up to Hector to figure out what's going on and, see if he can perhaps escape his bullying ways to try and help someone that he's actually bullied. So yeah, we're just in the last stages, and hopefully that will be out in, I think it's October. Right, now we go into questions about writing. So if children are struggling with their writing, and don't worry, everyone struggles with their writing, do you have any tips for how they should start to practice and develop their writing? Yes. So I have lots of tips. I have 3 key tips which I always speak about, and which I always give to children who are wanting to write but finding it hard to. Number 1 is to step away from whatever it is you're writing, and to go and explore other worlds. So whether it's more books, whether you're doing lots more reading, reading other stories, or whether it's going to an art exhibition or watching a film or whatever it is, just step away, go and do something that you love to do, and then I promise you something will happen inside your brain that will make you think, oh, okay, I can go back and, your brain almost needs a break from itself sometimes. So staring at a page doesn't help all the time. Sometimes you just need to go and give it a break, and you'll come up with more ideas, or will get some kind of inspiration that will make you want to sit down and write. The second one is to not worry about structure or form or doing something in a right way. There is no right way for writing. So I have wonderful friends who are authors who are you know, they're very structured. They have post-it notes, and you know, the rooms look like detective crime scenes. They have, you know, ropes and diagrams and pins and, you know, thread linking things together, and tons of notes. And then there's someone like me who doesn't really have anything. I do have a notebook in which I'll scribble, you know, just ideas down, or might do some research, for example, stars and constellations. But I won't write in a very over formatted way. I'll just go from chapter 1 and then I'll just see where the story takes me. Sometimes it goes the wrong way, so I have to go back and start again. And sometimes characters pop up that shouldn't be in there, so I'll go back and take those out. But I tend to write from chapter 1 through to the end and then just see where the story goes. So yeah, there's no right or wrong way. So as long as you're enjoying the process as much as you can, just keep on writing, and just don't worry about, you know, right and wrong. Just do what you are finding fun to do and what you are enjoying. And I think the third tip is, of course, to never stop. If you are a writer, if you love to write, you will always continue writing, no matter what you're doing in your life. A lot of people think that writers are people who literally write day and night, and it's not true. Most of us have lived many other lives. Most of us do live many other lives. So before I started writing, even part-time, I had 17 jobs, summer jobs and internships and, you know, other full-time jobs, and throughout all of that I would always be writing. I'd always be writing my lunch break or at home when I got back in the evenings. There was something in me that just wouldn't stop. So if you're a writer, just don't stop. You know, make sure that you give yourself space and time to write, no matter what it is that you're doing in your life, no matter how much homework you might have. Just make sure that you are always able to give yourself a little bit of time to do what you love, and if that's to write, then that's to write. So yeah, so stepping away, going and reading something or doing something, and giving your brain a break. That's my tip number 1. Number 2 is to not be worried about right and wrong. Do what you love. And the third one is to continue no matter what. Right, we're getting lots of hellos. Hello, Emma, Gabriel, Rachel, Char. Oh, I love that name. Carrie. Carrie from Book Bear, hello. It's so lovely to see you and hear you, to know that I'm not speaking into some great void where there's no one there, which I do often. Okay, so the second question is it important to you to have a writing routine? Right, I get asked this question a lot, and my very simple answer to that is no. And unfortunately my editor and publishers know this. I don't have a structured routine. I tend to write, again, there's no right or wrong, but I tend to write when I absolutely 1000% want to write. And there can be weeks, even months, when that feeling won't arrive, where I do not feel like I want to write. I can't force myself to do it. I have to want to do it. So that means that I don't have a routine. Any kind of routine I do develop tends to be in the editing process, when Lena, poor Lena, is chasing me, and when I have deadlines. Then I will tend to write at night, when everything else is done and I can just be and breathe, and then the world is quiet and I can just sit and sit with my words. And yeah, during the editing period, that's when the kind of crunch time, then I'll be working 24 hours a day and just trying to finish it. But most of the time it has to be when I want to write, and usually when I want to write is usually at night time, when I'm completely alone and everyone else is asleep. Oh, thank you so much, Gabriel, for saying you like the boy at the back of the class, and thank you so much, Rachel, for also loving it. Thank you. Getting so many lovely comments. Okay, the next question is, whoever wrote these, thank you so much. The ideas for your stories have come from serious real-life issues that you have encountered through visiting Calais and other personal experiences. Is it important to write what you know? That is such an interesting question. My answer to that is is both a combination of yes and no. Hello, Forum Books. right, Gabriel, I'm going to answer your question in just a moment. Okay, so writing from what you know, I think every single story that you write, whether it's a science fiction book or whether it's a fantasy fiction or whether it's a fairy tale or whether it's steeped in a little bit of real life, will always have elements of things that you know. Things that are familiar to you or that you have grown up with or that you are familiar with. I think it's important to include all of that because your information senses and what you have seen in the world and how you take it will inevitably be in your books as well and in your words. But you don't have to write exactly about what you know. I write fairy tales too. I write other stories that have, nothing to do with real life, but I love writing them just as much as anything else. But it will always have a part of me in it because I'm writing it and I'm seeing that story from my point of view. So you can definitely write about what you know, and inevitably, even if you're writing extreme fantasy fiction, you'll always have parts of you that will fall into it some way, but you don't have to stick to just cold hard facts and cold hard reality, of course not. You can use your imagination, that's what it's there for, and go wherever you want it to take you, really. Right, Rachel Hodgson is asking, what is the star outside my window about? Oh, okay, I'm so sorry. So the star outside my window is about a young girl called Anaya, and she has a little brother called Noah, and the book opens with them going into a foster home. Now, something really sad has happened to Anaya and Noah, which I won't go into because that will give too much of the story away, but Anaya is a star hunter. She is fascinated with the constellations, she loves anything to do with the night sky, and she believes that as a result of the reasons for her moving into a foster home, she believes that her mum is part of a star. So she goes on a pretty epic quest to do something to make sure that everybody knows that this is her mum's star. So that's what the star outside my window is about, and it features, of course, Simba, from The Lion King, because I grew up watching Disney cartoons, and of course there's that infamous scene where Simba and Mufasa talk about the stars and how the kings of old are looking down. So Anaya takes that story very much to heart in her quest. So that's what the star outside my window is about, and I hope I've given you enough to want to read it, but not too much as to give the game away. I think Gabriel asked me which one is my favourite book out of the two. I always get asked this question, and it's not one I can answer because it's like asking me, which of my fingers I like best or which of my hands I like best. They're very different, but they're very close to my heart. But I have to say, The Boy at the Back of the Class was easier to write, and in that way, I would say, in a kind of very fudgy way of answering that question, The Boy at the Back of the Class was easier to write, but I love them both very, very much, both the stories very much. I love the characters in them very much, and they both mean very different things to different parts of my world. So yeah, I can never answer that question very well. Oh, Gabriel has also asked, were you inspired by anyone to write The Star Outside My Window? Yes, so the Star Outside My Window is dedicated to my aunt, Montahina Rumajannat, who was an amazing, wonderful woman. I won't go into why her story inspired me to write it, but her memory is the reason why The Star Outside My Window was written, or even conceived, I think, in so many ways, and it's why Making Her Street exists. So you'll have to read the book to understand a little bit more, and I do explain at the back why it was, at the back of the story, why it was my aunt's story has inspired me to write this book. Right, I'm going to move on to one of the... Oh, we have just 2 more questions left, and then I can stop waffling and you can all go back to your day. Right, as a writer, what is the best part? The beginning of a new story or finishing it? Oh, I have to say it's a bit of both. So I am what people call a starter. I love starting new things. I get ideas all the time for new, not just new stories, but new actions to take, new things I want to do, new places I want to go, and I get very, very excited, and then I tend to flounder probably about halfway through. I'm like, oh, this is actually quite hard, and oh, there's a new idea that just popped up and I want to go and do that. So I love starting something new. I love finishing something as well, because it's really exciting to finish something. The hardest part is the middle bit, just trying to get to the end, and then you're so ecstatic when you've reached the end that nothing else matters. But I have to say, I think the beginning is the most fun, because you don't know where the story's going to go. You don't know, who the characters are going to be. You don't know what's going to happen with this book yet. And anything is possible. So I really love that. And I think the feeling I get when I'm finished is just exhaustion mingled with yay, it's done, and I don't have to think about it anymore, think about getting through that middle part anymore. But yeah, so I think it's the beginning. I think it's sitting with a new idea and seeing where it goes. Michelle Walker has just asked, are you going to write a new book? Yes, so I'm writing a new book called The Night Bus Hero, so that will be out in October, and we'll see what happens after that, but I don't know what will happen after that. I'm literally living my life week by week at the moment. So we'll see if I make it to October for that book to come out. And the final question, yay! And then I'll hopefully take some of yours as well. How difficult was it to get your book published? So my journey towards publication is really, really long, very long. And let's see, where do I start it from? So I kind of wrote my first draft of a book, which had nothing to do with anything really. It was a kind of teenage angst book when I was at university. So it's around about when I was 18, 19, I wrote a ridiculous book called Oh Please, really long lees at the end, which didn't have a plot, didn't even have characters. It was just a basic whinge about life as a teenager. And I remember giving that in to my professor, Patricia Dunker at the time, and in Aberystwyth, and she was very kind. She was very clever as well. She said, oh, let me give this into my publishers, my agent, and let me see what happens. And I think it was her publisher, and they wrote a lovely letter saying there's no plot line, nothing much happens. It's just basically like a diary that you're complaining about A-levels and having to go to university and all the rest of it. So why don't you go back and write something a bit more exciting, and then try to look in the writers and illustrators yearbook and find an agent, and then just continue. So I went away and started writing a trilogy about chocolate, which took me 8-9 years of research, which involved eating a lot of it. And during those 8-9 years, I was working other jobs. I left university. I worked for lots of different types of organisations. I was writing the chocolate books on my lunch breaks and my at night, and it took me about 8 years to find my current agent. So I made my way through the writer's yearbook. So every year I would go to the library and either borrow it for weeks on end and just make a list of all the agents, or I would, if I could afford it, I'd buy a copy for myself. And I spent about 7 years kind of just cold calling with manuscripts, just sending manuscripts off to agents, as I think most authors do, and really getting standard responses saying, oh, this is, thank you for submitting, but we're not interested right now. And then I had the idea that maybe I should give my manuscript inside a chocolate box so that it would be sure to reach an editor, because it's about chocolate, so I thought I was being clever. And luckily my agent Sylvia Molteni thought that was a hilarious idea, and even though my covering letter to her for those books had an error, not even in the letter, the error was dear, before I even wrote her name. I didn't even spot it because I'd checked through that letter 50 billion times. I didn't see it, but she found it hilarious, and luckily she liked the book enough to take me on. And whilst we were trying to fathom how to sell the chocolate books, I wrote this one. And it's really weird because the chocolate trilogy, I've been working on that for 8-9 years. And I'm still working on it in many ways, and this was written in 9 weeks in the first draft, and all this has happened with it. So you never know what's going to stick and what's going to happen. You just have to keep persevering and trying different agencies and all the rest of it. But my story was the long one to getting published, but it ended very happily, and it's very exciting. Right. I think that I'm at the end of my questions, which is amazing. So what I'm going to now do is I'm going to scroll, I think, to see. I'm really bad at this. To see if anybody wants to ask me anything. Just trying to see if I can scroll. Yes, I can. That's amazing. Technology. All right. I think people are having lovely conversations with each other. Oh, Tracy Hyam, is it? Beautiful name. I hope I'm saying that correctly, your surname. Hi, what are you currently reading? What am I currently reading? I have usually about 4 or 5 books on the go. Right now I'm reading a lot of Anthony Trollope's books because I think he's an absolute genius, and I don't really get time to read them because usually we're running about and doing all kinds of events, but this whole episode in the world's history has meant I can actually sit down and read. So I'm reading an amazing book called The American Senator. I'm also reading a Persephone books range book. Actually, I'm reading 3 at the moment. I can't remember their titles, but I'm reading that. And I'm also just about to start Dark Whisper by Vashti, who just won the Blue Peter award last year. So, yeah, can't wait. Oh, there's some people really missing each other. Oh God, I hope you get to see each other soon. Sarah Patel has asked, who's my favourite author? Sarah, that's a very naughty question because there is no one answer to that. I gotta have about 1 billion, so literally I've tried to count them all. Everything from Roald Dahl to J.R. Tolkien to I think Sophie Anderson is amazing. Oh God, all my names have gone blank now, but there are just a world of amazing authors, and I love so many, and I can't answer that question ever. Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte. God, I'm going through a Bronte phrase as well. Arthur Conan Doyle, all the classics, and then you've got phenomenal new authors who are gracing our bookshelves as well. And for some reason I can't remember their names, but I can remember some of the titles. So The Girl Who Stole the Elephant is just absolutely staggering. I just finished that a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, sorry, that's really lame. Can't even answer that question, no matter how much I try. Oh, some people are saying that they really miss each other. It's so lovely seeing this kind of whole friendship group on here. So lovely. I hope you get to see each other very soon, and stay safe while you're at it as well. Right. Did you want to have a different job at first? That's from Gabriel. Gabriel, thank you so much for all your questions. Did I ever want to have a different job? Yes. I had many other visions for my life. So I remember being at primary school and wanting to be an architect. That was my big thing. And I think a part of me still does. So I've always loved building things. I made a doll's house. It wasn't even a doll's house, I'd call it a doll's office. I made it like an office building out of a Walker's crisp box when I was at primary school. And I remember being so obsessed with it, I would spend every break time that I could, to the great upset of my friends, building this thing in class. And I loved it. I loved building, sticking stuff on, creating furniture out of things, and I wanted to be an architect quite desperately, I remember. But then I was told by a very very sad character who was a careers advisor that I would never be able to do that because I wasn't very good at maths. I wasn't very good. I didn't like maths. Maths scared me for some reason. So when I heard that, I completely, utterly, I was distraught. I remember going home and going, I can't be an architect, Mum. I have to be something else, and I don't know if there's anything else I want to be. And I remember being really upset for weeks. And then my lovely primary school teacher said that, well, you're also really good at reading and writing, and there's lots of other things you can do, so don't worry. But I remember being really upset. And I did go on to take night classes in architecture after I finished university, so that dream's still kind of with me in many ways, and I love anything to do with buildings and kind of anything to do with design. So yeah, but I did want to be an architect for a long time. Mum wanted me to be a doctor, and I was like, that's not happening, because I will faint at the sight of blood anytime you show me anything. Okay, so let me just scroll down a little bit more. We have exactly 5 minutes left, so let's see what we have. Sarah has spotted Snowy over my shoulder. Absolutely, Snowy comes with me absolutely everywhere, to the point where I get asked if he's coming with me on holiday when I'm going on holiday with my family, with worried expressions on their faces. And he has come with me on holiday, actually. Not ashamed to admit it. Oh, hello Husnara and Ruqayya, hello. So Ruqayya has asked, or has said, it would be amazing if a movie of the boy at the back of the class could be made. Oh, that's so lovely. I don't know if that will ever be something that's a reality, but thank you for thinking that. And huge love and hugs to you and your gorgeous mum. Right. Linda has asked, would you like your books to be adapted for TV or film? Wow, that's I don't know. I know that I wouldn't want them to be adapted if they're going to be changed. I think that's one of my pet peeves. When you love a book really deeply, and then you're really excited to go and watch them, and then suddenly everything's changed, or they've added extra characters, or the plot line's completely unrecognizable. I really hate that. So if they did ever get adapted, whether it's TV or film, if that ever happens, I just wouldn't want it to be changed. I don't think I'd mind what format, where it was being shown, but Sarah Patel has asked, Neo, hello Neo, wants to know if you have read the Hunger Games trilogy, and if so, which is your favourite? It's the first one. The first one is genius. I think the first book of most trilogies just capture you from the offset, because that's the book that makes you want to read book 2 and 3. Hunger Games is pretty phenomenal, but I remember thinking that it did remind me a lot of The Lord of the Flies, but yeah, it's absolutely staggering, that trilogy, but definitely the first one. I wonder which one your one is, Neo. Which one's your favourite? Right, and with 3 minutes to finish line, I think we're nearly done. I'm just going to see if there's any more questions. Right, Linda has said, I'm loving your staging for your Facebook Live. Makes the change from trying to analyse authors' bookcases. I have a big bookcase over there, but it is very messy and has books literally falling out of it, so I would not want to put you through that, Linda. Thank you so much for appreciating my decorating skills. So you might see there's a Tintin there, and there is a Mufasa, or is it Simba when he's older, and yeah, some Folio Society books, which I love. I love the hardcover and smelling Folio Society pages, they're so lovely. And Neo has answered the first one as well. Thank you. I feel kind of vindicated for your answer, with your answer for that. And on that very happy note, thank you so very much for joining me. I can't see... Oh, yeah, no, thank you so very much for joining me. And I hope that you have an amazing Independent Bookshop Week coming up, all of you. I know that bookshops are starting to open up, although the new normal isn't the normal that we knew, but I hope that the new normal proves just as happy and exciting as always. And thank you for hearing me waffle on for a whole hour. I'm well impressed with everyone for sticking with me. And John Rayner has just said hello to Year 5. So on the chat side, we've had lots of people saying hello to each other, and it's children saying hello to one another because they miss each other so much. And that's a beautiful thing to see and to witness. Thank you so much for letting me see that. And I hope you get to see each other very, very soon. Fingers crossed. Right. Lucy I've got 1 minute. Lucy asks, please can you write the sequel to The Star Outside My Window? Wow. What would that look like, Lucy? Maybe you can start writing it. I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. And lots of lovely thank yous. Thank you so very much. That's so kind of you. Have an amazing rest of the afternoon, whatever you're doing, wherever you are. Stay safe and have an amazing, amazing independent bookshop week ahead, filled with lots of reading adventures. Bye. All right.